He was British boxing's crown jewel, a showman, a knockout artist, a millionaire with a punch that could silence arenas. Prince Naseem Hamed wasn't just a fighter, he was a phenomenon. With somersault entrances, leopard print trunks, and an ego as loud as his ring walks, he captivated the world. But today, the prince lives far from the spotlight. Gone are the lights, the cheers, the Ferrari pull-ups. In their place, silence, weight gain, and a name that younger fans barely remember. What happened to Prince Naz? Why did one of boxing's brightest stars vanish in his prime? And is the life he lives now as golden as the belts he once wore? In this video, we dive deep into the rise, the riches, the downfall, and the haunting quiet that followed. This is the story of a man who changed boxing forever, then disappeared before anyone could ask why. In the steel-hearted city of Sheffield, where gray skies hang low and futures often feel fixed in place, a boy was born who never quite fit the mold. His name was Naseem Hamed. Short, brown-skinned, full of attitude. A spark in a place made of iron. He wasn't supposed to rise. Not there. Not then. Not in early 90s Britain, where boxing still clung tightly to its old-school heroes and proper etiquette. Naseem was everything the sport tried to ignore. Loud, flashy, Arab, unapologetically confident. But that didn't stop him. Born on February 12, 1974, to Yemeni immigrants, Naseem came from a family of 11 children. Their home in Wincobank wasn't glamorous. It was crowded, chaotic, and grounded in survival. His parents worked long hours just to make ends meet. Money was tight. Food, sometimes tighter. Violence, crime, and temptation loomed outside every door. It wasn't the kind of place that produced champions. It was the kind that swallowed dreams whole. And yet, from a young age, Naseem stood out. He wasn't just quick. He was electric. Even as a child, he was obsessed with movement. He'd shadowbox in mirrors, mimic Muhammad Ali's footwork, and talk about beating Sugar Ray Leonard one day. No one believed him, but he believed himself. That confidence, unbreakable, unshakable, would become his trademark. Everything changed when he walked into Brendan Ingle's gym. Ingle was a unique figure in British boxing, an Irishman who believed that boxing wasn't just about punches, but about rhythm, intelligence, and self-expression. He saw something in Naseem most others missed. He didn't try to tame the boy. He honed him. Inside that gym, Naseem learned how to fight, not just swing. Brendan had him dancing to reggae, ducking under broomsticks, shadowboxing to music, and mastering angles that confused opponents before a punch was even thrown. But beyond drills, Brendan taught something more vital: how to think in the ring, how to control chaos, and how to weaponize individuality. Still, there was one thing even Ingle couldn't teach: raw, freakish power. And Naseem had it in both hands. By his teens, he was folding grown men in sparring. His left hand was thunder, his reflexes unnatural, his timing scary. He didn't just hit opponents, he humiliated them. He made them miss wildly and then punished them with shots they never saw coming. But even as his skills sharpened, the boxing world wasn't ready. Promoters scoffed. Commentators dismissed him. He was too cocky, too mouthy, too street. But all the while, his name kept rising. Whispered in gyms, written on back pages, shouted in working-class homes across the country. Prince Naseem Hamed wasn't just coming, he was inevitable. When Naseem Hamed turned professional in 1992, it didn't take long for people to realize he wasn't just another fighter. He was a spectacle, a storm dressed in silk and gold. From the moment he walked down the aisle, arms spread like royalty, swagger in every step, the audience couldn't look away. Then the bell would ring, and the spectacle would turn savage. His first televised fight saw him toy with his opponent, then flatten him in 2 rounds. Fans didn't know whether to laugh or gasp. Was this a parody, or was this the future? Turns out, it was both. Prince Naz, as he now called himself, became a media magnet. He talked trash with poetic rhythm. He predicted knockouts, laughed at opponents during pressers, danced between punches in the ring. He was part Ali, part pro wrestler, part street kid who'd made it big, and he backed it all up with destruction. But his rise wasn't just about entertainment. It was about dominance. He ended fights with 1 punch. His knockouts weren't just wins, they were statements. And behind all the flash was a fighter with absurd skill. He could dodge 5-punch combinations by centimeters. He could fire back with shots that curled around guards and landed with precision. He was inventing angles in real time. What looked like showboating was often just mastery in disguise. By 1995, the boxing world could no longer ignore him. That year, he walked into hostile card Cardiff to challenge Steve Robinson for the WBO featherweight belt. Welsh fans booed him relentlessly until Nas made them silent. He dismantled Robinson with movement, power, and timing. In round 8, he finished the job, snatching the title and grinning through the boos. The prince had taken the throne, and from there, he built a kingdom of chaos. Title defenses became theater. He'd enter arenas on magic carpets, descend from platforms, do flips over the top rope. His trunks sparkled. His gloves were custom. His hair slicked back like a rock star. The fight was only part of the show. The rest was pure spectacle. But this wasn't style over substance. It was style and substance. He crushed former champions. He unified titles. He made established fighters look amateur. He didn't just beat them, he embarrassed them. By 1997, America came calling. HBO signed him. The bright lights of Madison Square Garden welcomed him. His U.S. debut against Kevin Kelly turned into one of the wildest fights in modern boxing. Multiple knockdowns, chaos in every round. And in the fourth, Nas landed a crushing left that sealed it. The prince had conquered America, but even as his star exploded, even as the cars got flashier and the entrances wilder, something dangerous was creeping beneath the surface. With a crown on his head and gold around his waist, Prince Naseem Hamed ruled like no one before him. He was boxing's rock star, untouchable, unbothered, undeniably elite. Every fight was an event, every entrance a spectacle. He wasn't just boxing anymore, he was performing, and the money followed. Millions per fight, sponsorships, endorsements, luxury features. He drove McLarens, Ferraris, Bentleys. He wore diamond-encrusted watches. His houses, mansions in Surrey and Windsor, filled with gold trim and imported marble. He wasn't a champion, he was an empire. But here's the thing about empires, they expand faster than they stabilize. And deep inside Hamed's empire, chaos was brewing. He still won, convincingly. Fighters like Tom Boom Boom Johnson, Wilfredo Vazquez, Paul Ingle, all fell. He unified the WBO, IBF, and WBC featherweight titles. He landed on magazine covers, red carpets, and the front pages of tabloids. But behind the scenes, things were shifting. The work wasn't the same. The camps were looser. The old Brendan Ingle structure, the tough love, the long sessions, the strict nutrition had faded. Nas had parted ways with the man who made him. The split was ugly. Ingle accused Hamed of being arrogant, of abandoning discipline. Hamed said Ingle was jealous. Whatever the truth, the results showed. Training got softer. Sparring sessions were selective. Diets became less strict. He bulked up between fights. Rumors swirled of skipped sessions and inflated egos. The flash had never been brighter, but the fighter underneath it was changing, and still he kept winning. That's the danger, because when you keep winning, you don't question the process. Even as reflexes dulled and timing slipped, Nas believed in one thing, his power. He once said, "I can knock these guys out at 50%, and he meant it. But boxing isn't about power alone, it's about hunger. And hunger. Nas was slowly losing. He still danced into the ring, still flipped over the ropes, still declared himself unbeatable, but those closest to the sport saw the signs. He was relying on instinct, not preparation, on ego, not urgency. The prince still had his crown, but the ground beneath it was cracking. And across the ocean, a fighter was watching, waiting, preparing to end the illusion and the reign. On the surface, Prince Naseem Hamed was untouchable, undefeated, wealthy, worshipped, but beneath the designer suits and million-dollar smiles, the foundation was weakening. And like all tragic stories, the fall didn't begin with a punch. It began with pride. The split from Brendan Ingle had already sent quiet tremors through his training. Without the man who taught him rhythm, restraint, and precision, Naseem became his own general. His camps morphed from tight regimens to bloated entourages. The sparring partners, chosen to flatter, not challenge. The conditioning, good enough to make weight, barely. The mindset, no longer built on discipline, but dominance. He still believed in his power. He still thought he could end any fight with one shot. And for a while, he wasn't wrong. But boxing is cruel to overconfidence. In private, his reflexes were slower. His footwork, once fluid like water, began to look jerky and labored. The weight cuts got harder. He'd enter training camps overweight, then burn himself out to meet the featherweight limit. Nutritionists warned him. Former trainers offered quiet concern, but no one in his corner had the clout to stop him. He surrounded himself with yes men. No Brendan, no correction, no breaks. And yet, the belts kept coming. The highlight reels stayed packed. He stopped Boom Boom Johnson to unify titles. He iced Paul Ingle, dropped Wayne McCullough, and picked up the WBC title by 1999. On paper, he was still the king. But paper lies. Commentators started noticing something was off. The showmanship remained, but the sharpness didn't. Interviews were more arrogant, less insightful. Opponents weren't terrified anymore. They were interested. Fighters who once ducked him now circled like sharks. They saw something behind the curtain, a champion coasting, not climbing. The pressure to stay perfect became a prison. He wasn't fighting for greatness. He was fighting to protect the image, the myth of Prince Naz. Each fight had to end in a knockout. Each entrance had to top the last. Each opponent had to be embarrassed, not just beaten. The performance grew heavier than the purpose. And then came the whispers. Promoters grew frustrated. He became harder to negotiate with. Dates were pushed. Fights were stalled. Naz, they said, had become unpredictable. He demanded more money, more control, more respect, all while giving less in return. But the illusion held until one man shattered it. April 7th, 2001, Las Vegas, the MGM Grand. Prince Naseem Hamed entered the ring, smiling, strutting, drenched in swagger. Fireworks exploded, cameras flashed, the music roared. He was still the showman, still the king, still undefeated at 35-0. But across from him stood a man who didn't care about theatrics. Marco Antonio Barrera, the Mexican technician, the cerebral assassin. He wasn't there to entertain. He was there to dismantle. The fight was billed as a legacy-defining clash. Power versus precision. Chaos versus control. Hamed thought he'd walk through Barrera like he had everyone else. He'd land the left. The crowd would roar. Another knockout. Another crown jewel. But from the opening bell, the energy shifted. Barrera didn't brawl. He didn't fall into the trap. He boxed. Clean, smart, disciplined. He stepped outside of Naz's looping shots. He countered with crisp jabs and short hooks. And most shockingly, he didn't fear him. By round 3, Hamed looked frustrated. His punches missed. His timing was off. His footwork, once fluid, looked awkward. Barrera made him miss, made him pay. And as the rounds wore on, the gap widened. This wasn't just a loss. It was a dissection. Naz tried to rally, but there was no plan B. He had never needed one. His whole career had been plan A. Knock them out. But now, faced with a fighter who refused to play his game, he looked lost. The crowd sensed it. The commentators began questioning what they were seeing. Was this the real Hamed, or had the myth finally met reality? In round 12, Barrera delivered a symbolic final blow, quite literally. He pinned Naz to the turnbuckle and slammed his head into the pad. A final message. The show is over. The judges gave Barrera a wide, unanimous decision. The unbeaten prince had been dethroned. And just like that, the illusion shattered. But what followed was even more shocking. There was no post-fight press conference, no bold claims, no promise of revenge. Hamed disappeared, quietly, almost shamefully. The man who once danced under the lights exited without a word. After Las Vegas, the boxing world waited. A rematch, a comeback, a press tour, anything. But from Prince Naseem Hamed, there was silence. Weeks passed, then months. Promoters begged, broadcasters floated ideas. But Naz said nothing. It was as if a switch had flipped. The man who once couldn't stay out of the spotlight had walked straight into the dark. When he finally did return, it wasn't with fireworks, it was with a fizzle. His comeback fight came in 2002 against Spain's Manuel Calvo, a solid but unspectacular opponent. The stage was set in London, not Vegas, not Madison Square Garden, but it still drew attention. Could the prince reclaim his crown? But from the opening round, it was clear. This wasn't the same fighter. He looked sluggish, disinterested, overweight. The flair was gone. The reflexes dulled. He won a slow, forgettable decision. But the crowd booed. The press ripped him apart. The magic had evaporated. And then, without warning, he vanished again. No retirement press release, no farewell fight, no documentary, no closure. He just stopped. He was 28 years old. In a sport where legends often fight into their late 30s, some into their 40s, Naseem Hamed was done before most fighters even peaked. The man who once said he'd retire undefeated walked away with a 36-1 record, and more questions than answers. Why did he quit so young? Was it fear of another loss? Was it shame? Was it injury? Ego? Faith? Depression? Theories flooded the forums and tabloids. Fans debated. Writers speculated. But the one person who never explained was Hamed himself. He had gone from world champion to ghost in just 12 months. And for over a decade, that silence never broke. Retired at 28. No farewell, no comeback. Just silence. But while Prince Naseem Hamed vanished from the ring, his life outside of it remained loud, at least in appearance. He wasn't fighting anymore, but he was still living like a king. By the early 2000s, Hamed's net worth had ballooned to an estimated £38 million. He had the money, he had the name, and he made sure the world saw both. His garage looked like a car commercial. McLaren SLR, Lamborghini Murcielago, Peugeot, Bentley Continental, GT, Ferrari Spider. Most people dream of sitting in one supercar in their lifetime. Naseem had 5 before breakfast. He moved into a mansion in the quiet luxury of Surrey, gated, guarded, glass walls and marble floors. Inside, Persian rugs, custom chandeliers, diamond-studded furnishings, and framed photos of his knockout glory days. He wasn't on the front pages anymore, but if you walked past his estate, it still screamed royalty. Tabloids would occasionally catch glimpses of him, out shopping in Windsor, driving one of his exotic vehicles, or walking with security. But the man they captured in those images didn't look like the prince anymore. He had gained weight, a lot of it. Some photos suggested he was nearly double the size of his fighting weight. The once lean featherweight phenom now looked heavy, stiff, and uncomfortable. Comment sections were brutal. "Is that really Prince Naz?" some asked. "He looks unrecognizable." But the change wasn't just physical, it was existential. He wasn't involved in boxing. He didn't train young fighters. He didn't sit ringside. He didn't even comment publicly on big fights. The man who once defined British boxing seemed completely detached from it. And yet, the lifestyle continued. Private shopping sprees, diamond Rolexes, first-class travel. In public, he smiled and waved. In private, insiders whispered about loneliness, boredom, even frustration. It was clear the fire was gone. The discipline that built him had evaporated. The sport that gave him purpose was something he now actively avoided. There were no public breakdowns, no wild scandals, just nothing. He was living a quiet life of extreme wealth, but without identity. He had the mansion, the cars, the riches, but there was no mentorship, no podcast, no autobiography, no attempt to control or even explain his own story. And that's what made it feel hollow. This wasn't just a boxer who retired, it was a legend who erased himself. The flash was still there, but the man behind it, he was slowly disappearing. If the Barrera loss cracked the crown, what came next shattered the myth. It was May 2005. Prince Naseem Hamed, behind the wheel of his 325,000-pound McLaren Mercedes SLR, tore down Ringinglow Road in South Yorkshire. The speed? Blistering. The move? Reckless. He attempted to overtake multiple cars on a blind curve, and what happened next changed everything. He collided head-on with a Volkswagen Golf. The crash was violent. The other driver, Anthony Bergen, was left with multiple fractures, internal injuries, and long-term trauma. He would suffer physically for years, his life forever altered. As news broke, fans and media scrambled for answers. Was it really Naz? Could the once idolized boxer, who spoke about divine protection and destiny, have caused something so careless? The truth emerged fast. Yes, it was him, and it was worse than imagined. Investigations revealed he was not only speeding, but uninsured at the time of the crash. His driving had been dangerously aggressive. There was no mystery, no debate. The man once known for floating through the air was now known for nearly taking a life on the ground. In May 2006, Hamed was sentenced to 15 months in prison for dangerous driving. He served 16 weeks before being released early under the UK's home detention curfew scheme. But the damage was done, not just to Bergen, but to Hamed's image. The media, once split on whether he was genius or showman, now had a new label: reckless. The silence that had once seemed mysterious now looked arrogant. The reclusiveness, once interpreted as humility, now felt like shame. He wasn't just a forgotten fighter anymore. He was a convicted felon. And perhaps the saddest part? He never truly addressed it. No deep apology, no interviews, no real accountability, just more silence. The headlines faded. The world moved on. But the prince didn't return. He could have used the moment as a reckoning, a comeback arc, a cautionary tale. But instead, he pulled back further, retreating deeper into privacy. He had already been slipping from memory. Now, he was running from it. And the myth that once made him untouchable? It was gone. Time has a way of rewriting legacies, especially when the subject goes quiet. As the 2010s rolled in, the boxing world changed. New stars emerged: Anthony Joshua, Tyson Fury, Amir Khan. Crowds chanted different names, and Prince Naseem Hamed, once the heartbeat of British boxing, faded into background noise. Young fans discovered him only through YouTube clips, 360p knockouts, flamboyant entrances, highlight reels from an era they barely remembered. And even those were watched more for entertainment than reverence. The man who once redefined footwork, timing, and power was now reduced to that flashy guy with the flip. And Hamed let it happen. He didn't correct the record. He didn't mentor rising fighters. He wasn't ringside for big British bouts. No gym, no brand, no voice in the conversation. In an era where even retired fighters launch podcasts, build coaching empires, and go on redemption tours, Nas stayed silent. He was inducted into the International Boxing Hall of Fame in 2015, a moment that should have been triumphant, a victory lap. But his speech was short, his presence subdued. He smiled, accepted the honor, and exited the stage. It felt hollow, like a man haunted by unfinished business. Physically, he looked different. He walked slower, moved heavier, his once chiseled physique now buried under years of indulgence. Health rumors grew. Reports whispered of knee problems, chronic pain, and weight-related complications. Public appearances became rare, and when he was spotted, fans barely recognized him. Once, his entrances made entire arenas scream. Now, his name only drew murmurs at expos and conventions. Whatever happened to Nas, they'd ask? He had become a ghost in a sport he once lit on fire. What hurt fans most wasn't the loss to Barrera. It wasn't the prison time. It wasn't even the silence. It was what that silence represented, a refusal to own his legacy. Other greats, Lennox Lewis, Roy Jones Jr., Bernard Hopkins, stayed involved. They taught, they spoke, they aged into relevance. Nas? He disappeared. Some say he never recovered from the Barrera humiliation. Others believe the prison sentence crushed his spirit. A few claim his faith deepened, and he simply chose peace over performance. But no answer ever satisfied. Because the truth is, the greatest tragedy wasn't that Prince Naseem fell. It's that he never tried to rise again. And that void, that could have been, echoes louder than any punch he ever threw.